Senator Obama, appreciating what you said about the media's preoccupation with race, there is one, right? The Nobel Prize-winning African-American author Toni Morrison famously observed about Bill Clinton, quote, "This is our first black president, blacker than any actual black person who could ever be elected in our children's lifetime." Do you think Bill Clinton was our first black president?
Well, I think Bill Clinton did have an enormous affinity with the African-American community, and still does. And I think that's well earned. You know, like John, one of the things that I'm always inspired by, this I'm serious about. I'm always inspired by young men and women who grew up in the South when segregation was still taking place, when you know, the transformations that are still incomplete but at least have begun had not yet begun. And to see that transformation in their own lives, I think that is powerful. And it is hopeful, because what it indicates is that people can change, and each successive generation can you know, create a different vision of how, you know, we have to treat each other. And I think Bill Clinton embodies that. I think he deserves credit for that. Now, I haven't, you know, I have to say that you know, I would have to, you know, investigate more, you know, Bill's dancing abilities and, you know, some of this other stuff before I accurately judged whether he was in fact a brother.
But let's Senator Clinton weigh in on that.
I'm sure that can be arranged. You know, I want to echo what Barack has said and what each of us has said repeatedly over the last days. You know, this campaign is obviously an incredible opportunity for so many people to become involved, to be part of making history. You've got a son of the South, you've got an African American, you have a woman. What better way to celebrate the legacy of Dr. King than to look at this stage right here tonight? And, you know, I'm reminded of one of my heroes, Frederick Douglass, who had on the masthead of his newspaper in upstate New York, the North Star, that right has no sex and truth has no color. And that is really the profound message of Dr. King. You know, the content of our character, who we are as people, and I think that, you know, my pride in being part of this campaign. Now, look, it's a hard-fought campaign. We have differences, but it would be unbecoming of any of us to not share those differences and to make the points we're making, because we are competing for the most important job in the world at a time when our country has been disgraced abroad, when we have denied and ignored the problems that are afflicting people in South Carolina and across America, when we know we will inherit a huge amount of damage from President Bush upon taking office in January 20th, 2009, whoever the next president is. So we are passionate about our cause, our candidacy, what we believe, what we want to do for America. And it is a great privilege for me to be part of this. And I think it's important that we stay focused on the future, what we are going to do together to make our country once again what it should be, to deal with this myriad of problems that awaits, because we can bring our country together and we can set big goals again. We can start acting like Americans and solve those problems together, and that's what I want to do.
And I have to say, Wolf, that I especially appreciate the fact that Hillary and John were giving me a tough time, because that shows I'm doing pretty good. I would be upset if there was too much civility in this debate, because it is competitive. One last point I want to make about this, though, and John alluded to it on the poverty issue. The one thing when I say we should not focus on my race or Hillary's gender in terms of choosing a candidate, that is not to say that we should be ignoring the very real problems that still exist in terms of race in America. So, for example, if we know that in our criminal justice system, African Americans and whites for the same crime are arrested at very different rates, are convicted at very different rates, receive very different sentences, that is something that we have to talk about. But that's a substantive issue, and it has to do with how do we pursue racial justice. If I am president, I will have a civil rights division that is working with local law enforcement so that they are enforcing laws fairly and justly. But I would expect a white president or a woman president should want to do the same thing, because I believe that the pursuit of racial equality, the perfection of this union, is not just a particular special interest issue of the African American community. That is how all of us are going to move forward, and to the extent that we don't deal with those issues, those long-standing, deep-seated issues, we will continue to be hampered. We will be competing with the world with one hand tied behind our backs.
And, Wolf, the challenge is for us to address all of these issues. We obviously still have problems of gender equality. Equal pay is not yet equal.
Right.
A woman makes 77 cents on a dollar, and women of color make 67 cents. So there is a big agenda waiting for the Democratic Party. And we feel so passionately about this because we not only are running for office, but we each in our own way have lived it. We have seen it. We have understood the pain and the injustice that has come because of race, because of gender. And it's imperative that as we move forward with our campaign, we make it very clear that each of us will address these issues. You don't hear the Republicans talking about any of this. You don't hear them talking about the disgrace of a criminal justice system that incarcerates so many more African Americans proportionately than whites. You don't hear any kind of effort to help historically black colleges and universities, something that I am committed to doing in order to make it clear that these are important institutions and have led the way for so many great leaders to be where they are today. So we have a specific set of policies and priorities that are really part of who we are, as well as part of what the Democratic Party stands for.